I'm standing in my home that I've built from the ground up. A lot of the times I'm here on my own and I'm learning it as I go. And it's kind of crazy looking back on it. For me, it's really easy to rush from one project to the next without taking time to really appreciate it. It's so easy to get frustrated or angry when I feel like I'm not learning something easily or quickly enough. And it's easy to forget how far I've come. Starting this journey terrified of chainsaws, having never used a framing nailer. I didn't even know plumbing vent stacks were a thing. Honestly, I've never even changed a faucet in my life, even up to this point. But before I started this project, I had one big belief. You can do anything you put your mind to. And I had this dream to be able to buy more land, have a larger homestead to be able to raise animals on, and to grow fruit trees, fruit bushes, vegetables at a scale I wasn't able to do before. A lot of you started watching this channel in the first year, the land development series, where I started by dropping all of these trees. I cleared an acre out of our 18 for our view, for the homestead, and for our home. And even though I was terrified of chainsaws due to my biological father's tree cutting accident, I knew owning a homestead would eventually require me to be able to use a chainsaw in some capacity, which is why I started using it. So I worked my way up slowly. I started by clearing a section of small trees, working my way up to the medium ones, and once that area was cleared, I felt comfortable enough with the research that I had done to drop some of the larger ones. Well, all of the larger ones. And I absolutely fell in love with tree felling, bucking wood, splitting wood, and being able to heat the bulk of our home with the energy that came from our own property. I think this was kind of a unique journey for people to watch, as women have really only started joining the trades in the last 3 generations in Canada. By the 1980s, women were slowly starting to trickle into forestry schools, but the numbers were small and the atmosphere was unfortunately unwelcoming. I'm so lucky to live in a generation where women have gone before me to pave the path. My grandma would be out using the snowblower, blowing her driveway, and my mom did concrete stamping projects, fixed drywall, changed out light fixtures, and so much more. So I grew up knowing that I could do these things. When we started land development, I truthfully did not know what I was doing, and the first thing that needed to be done was the driveway. My stepdad Craig built the driveway while I was his laborer for the week, helping him move brush, and he was slowly teaching me how to use the excavator. We did a lot of the land development jobs together, from installing the septic, trenching the run to bring in electricity, and excavating the foundation. Anytime I rented an excavator, Craig was there. It started off with Craig mainly running it, to slowly teaching me more and more with each rental, to me mainly running it by the end of the last few rentals. This was so empowering, and I was so grateful to have like a 20-30 plus year experienced operator teach me the ropes. One of my favorite memories on the excavator was pulling out the ginormous stump where my wood boiler sits right now and where my largest tree was to cut down. Another favorite memory is Craig teaching me how to climb over a pile of dirt or gravel safely. And another favorite memory is just being so comfortable and confident in the machine and trenching my heat lines from the wood boiler to my house. It honestly just felt so badass. But with those favorite memories come my least favorite memories, like when I was backfilling the trench for our main electrical line. The track fell off the excavator. Craig was on vacation. I was so new to this, but luckily a friend came to the rescue and got the track back on. And another terrible memory that still haunts me to this day is when I was picking up some dirt and a root flew out and hit the excavator and shattered the glass. This was an expensive fix, and it was really scary and really reminded me of the dangers of being an excavator operator. Even when you're in a big machine, crazy stuff can still happen. Those excavator weeks came at a huge cost, not only financially, but also emotionally. They were some of the toughest weeks because not only was I on the ground running the chainsaw, helping pull the wire, roll out the big O, helping position the wood boiler, helping Craig with the septic, raking out gravel, packing down gravel with the packer, or being in and actually running the excavator. On top of that, I was also in communication with the quarries, with the wholesalers, managing orders and deliveries of the transformer base, the septic materials, and the septic tank, all of the gravel and the sand. And on top of that, I had never ordered any of this in my life. It was so overwhelming. I felt like I was learning a new language, and I still feel like I'm learning all these different languages to this day. today, 3 years into this journey. I spent many hours on the phone weeks before the excavator even got delivered, planning every little detail that needed to happen. And that's why Craig and I were basically able to build the septic bed and field in a day and a half, get it inspected and backfill everything, because everything was timed out to perfection. That week really worked out. And on top of this, I was still editing my YouTube videos, which take about 20 hours a week to edit. I was still a wife and I was still a mom. Excavator weeks, inspection weeks, and just busy weeks in general have made it so difficult to perform regular life tasks like organizing, making meals, and eating healthy. So I've changed my tactic on meals in order to get us through this extremely busy season in life. Ordering meal kits is also amazing, but on those really busy weeks, Factor Meals is where it's at. Pre-made, chef-ready meals that come fresh and are never frozen. Factor takes the stress out of meal planning and sets you up for success. That's good. Like, I couldn't imagine making all of this in one night. Skip the grocery stores, the prep work, and the cooking fatigue. Instead, get chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals delivered right to your door. There's over 35 meals to choose from each week, including options like keto, calorie smart, vegan plus veggie, and more. Skip the takeout. Factor is cheaper and it's delicious. They're ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. This is also flexible. You can order 4 to 18 meals per week, and you can pause or reschedule your deliveries at any time. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use the code 50Biata to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. That's code 50Biata at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. And thanks so much to Factor Meals for sponsoring me this week. After 1 year of mainly doing land development and bringing in utilities, I was on to year 2, the home build phase, getting the foundation in, the walls up, and the home waterproof. Looking back, I can feel how rushed this time of my life was. It was a lot more rushed than that first year where I was able to take slower weeks, drop some trees, and be out in nature. This time I had a very strict schedule and a very high intensity paced workload for a very long time. Timelines got pushed back so easily, mainly due to my inexperience and just lack of knowledge and knowing how long things take. I thought installing the P-stirrups and the rebar for my foundation would take a day, and it took multiple. Tying the mesh and the rebar together. Before that, doing the insulation, the form boards, the stakes, the bracing in, all of that took so much time. But with that rush timeline, I got it done. The half load restrictions were lifted off our roads, and we were able to bring in the concrete truck. I learned that things take me so much longer to do, learning it from scratch. So I decided to hire the concrete pour out. Because it's so time sensitive, you don't have room to make a mistake and sit there and watch a YouTube video for an hour. You have to get it done. The concrete was poured that day, got it done, covering all of the in-floor heating, rebar, mesh, and all of the hard work that went on underneath it. And then I got on to my next rush, the framing. I had at least built my shed before this, so it wasn't all brand new, but building a vaulted wall like this is way different than building a 10 by 16 shed. I picked a date for our wall raising party with 20 of our friends and family were to show up, and I wanted to get all of my walls framed and stacked on top of each other before that day. Unfortunately, the timeline was again too rushed, but on that day, we all came together. It was beautiful. There was synergy. A lot of the guys were lifting the walls up, and I was on the ground framing the last few walls that needed to be done. This portion of the build taught me so much, that friends and family are really excited for your wins, and that people want to help and be involved in something meaningful, and that asking for help is a skill set. This help overflowed into so many other projects, like Craig and Cam helping get the roof rafters up because we had, again, a rush timeline. Trusses needed to get in. Or when my old neighbor Brian showed up, installed the trusses, and even taught me how to install some trusses and fixed my biggest mistake, not putting sill gasket underneath the interior walls.
And another time when my mom and a friend showed up and helped Cam and I install our windows, even though none of us had ever done it before.
And a lot of the other times, those odd days in between, the things that could be done alone, I was at it here by myself. I had to find ways to show ingenuity, to be able to do things without a second set of hands, like sheathing my roof for the most part on my own. Cam helped me with the 12/12 pitch, but when he was at work, I was putting plywood up onto the scaffolding and then lifting the plywood onto the roof and putting blocks up to stop the plywood from sliding back down. It took me 3 weeks to sheath our entire roof, way longer than it would take anyone experienced. And I had to come up with similar solutions for getting the outriggers over my gable end truss and for my overhang on my rafters.
And even getting the subfascia up alone.
Or doing the ice and water shield without a second person to hold the roll at the other end. What an absolute pain that was. I thought I was gonna fall off the roof multiple times, but I eventually figured it out. What I've learned is that whenever I'm attempting a project alone, especially for the first time, it is going to take you so much longer just to figure it out, especially in that first portion of that project. I've learned that I've had to give myself grace and get less frustrated with myself. And usually as that project progresses, it gets easier and easier as you gain that experience. And that it's also important to know when to ask for help. For example, getting my well pump ready to install was mainly a one-person task. I ordered the parts, put it all together, but then I was able to ask a plumber, hey, can you quickly review this before I put it 50 feet down into the earth? And I was able to ask an electrician, hey, can you make sure I did this right so that I don't do something wrong and destroy my well pump?
And I was able to do this by sending photos and videos for them to review, which was incredible.
And then when it went to actually installing the well pump, I knew I needed to ask for a second set of hands just in case something went wrong. I think it's also important to know who to ask for help. Sometimes when you make these connections and you're asking people in the trades questions all the time, you don't necessarily want to ask them for help for small things like lowering a well pump in. It's okay to just ask a friend who doesn't do construction for a living, hey, if you have time or if you're in the area, do you mind popping by for a half hour and help me lower this down? I'm so grateful for the people who have been able to show up and help us in so many different ways, mentally, physically, practically, and more. And I think it's important to know that friends aren't going to be like, I helped you, now you owe me. But being there for your friends, whether they've helped you or not, is so important. And being able to pay it forward is so gratifying as well.
I'm not necessarily going to be able to pay it forward to someone who's super experienced in the trades unless they ask for a second set of hands.
But I might be able to pay it forward and help out other people who are starting this journey, who are new to this, people who reach out to me online, my friends who are in the phase of, can we build a home? We've never done it before. I love being able to point them in the direction of wholesalers, designers, give them ideas and more. And then there were times where I couldn't do a project alone, but I didn't have any friends who could help that worked that specific trade. This is where I was able to outsource and hire someone who was willing to teach me kind of the ropes of their trade, like doing metal roofing for the first time. I asked around, I found Maddie. He was willing to get up on the roof with me. He did all of the metal trimming for the steel because I was getting so frustrated, but he taught me how to install the panels. Once Maddie taught me, I was able to adapt, figure out the best way to do it for myself, and then have Craig or Cam help me lift them into place and screw them down. I love that both of the men in my life will just let me lead a project. They'll show up, they'll be the help for the day, they'll listen to what I have researched and give me the help that I need. This was incredible for roofing because the panels were too big for me to lift up there on my own, and I was able to make all of those angled cuts. I cut 30 panels for the most complicated roof line for a first timer. I had pretty much all of my waterproofing done by the end of the second year, and the third year, this last year, was the rough-in series. And I got some finishing work done too, but I basically got everything done that's buried in behind the walls and in behind the insulation. The rough-ins were so much more work than I had anticipated without knowing how much work electrical, HVAC, plumbing, and insulation were going to take. The thing about the rough-ins is that it's really hard to find information online about the code in your specific area. You can watch an electrical video that's based in the States, but it's not going to match what is code here. And the projects that would take a team of trades a week took me 3 weeks. And that was with me being able to ask questions to plumbers, electricians, and HVAC technicians. Plumbing Oh my goodness, plumbing had me in some type of way frazzled. The code was so tricky to learn and to understand. And although I was here alone doing the plumbing, I had plumbers who I was able to ask questions to check my work before inspections. And I'm forever grateful for this. I don't know if you believe in divinity, but my biological father was a commercial plumber. He passed away when I was a baby, and I cannot even begin to tell you the amount of plumbing connections I've made along this journey. From reconnecting to an old friend who helped me design the flow and the layout of all of the ABS plumbing, to meeting random plumbers in Home Depot, one of them I have a great connection with still to this day, to even having plumbers reach out to me on YouTube that actually helped pass my plumbing inspection before insulation was allowed to go in, and even incredible suppliers. My plumbing videos were all over the place because I had plumbing underneath the slab before I even poured the concrete, and I even got all my vent stacks through the roof before roofing, and then the final stretch of the plumbing, bringing everything to where it was supposed to be, getting all the codes right for my final rough-in inspection. Electrical was another trade that required me to know a lot of code. This is another trade that started in the land development phase, starting with bringing in the mains and the transformer and having our outdoor panel. And then at the end of year 2, bringing the mains from the outdoor panel inside, getting the panel on the wall, and getting a few breakers in there, running the lines for my wood boiler. And in year 3, I actually roughed in the home. I learned that I really actually like electrical. I loved keeping it neat and organized and knowing where the lines are in my home. Again, I was on my own running the electrical. I couldn't have anyone help me here because the permit was out in my name. And so any electrician, even though they're more experienced than me, couldn't actually help me. But that didn't stop me from asking questions. A friend walked me through so many electrical things, teaching me three-way switches, which was one of the more trickier things to learn and still boggles my mind a little. And in return, I was able to cut some trees for him. It's so great being able to have those connections where you can help them and they can help you, especially when you're both building. I passed my electrical inspection with a few minor infractions that I fixed up and sent the photos in, and my inspector was impressed with the work that I did. He thought that it was neat and organized, and he said that either homeowner electrical inspections are terrible or they're incredible. They care about how neat it is, how organized the panel is. I'm very excited for him to see my panel. He hasn't seen it yet because that will come at the final electrical inspection, which, my God, I hope is this year in year number 4. I was definitely overwhelmed at the beginning of the electrical journey. I actually ended up calling a company, decided I was going to get a quote, but before they came out, I canceled on them and I said, honestly, don't bother. I'm going to attempt it myself. And I'm so glad I did. I learned so much. And it's a skill that's going to come in handy. Even just knowing how to replace fixtures is incredible, but knowing how your wires are run. And if I ever do any builds again, or even Cam's studio in the woods, I'm going to be able to wire it. No problem. This year, I also put up my ERV system and my ducting. Luckily for this, I had detailed plans that I had paid to get done because it's required, and all I had to do was follow those plans and figure out what I needed to order in order to put the ducting up. And also learned how important reading manuals are. Putting the ERV unit up and the inline duct heater up was actually pretty simple just because I read the manual. The manual told me what to do, how to install it, where the incoming air goes and where the outgoing air goes. That part of the system was easy. The tricky part was I should have put the insulation around my ducting before I put it up 8 feet off the ground. It was really difficult to install afterwards. At least if I had installed it on the big stretches first, I could have filled in the joints and the elbows afterwards, but it was tricky. What was great about doing the ERV system was I was actually able to ask some questions to the company who installed my boiler system. The heating system started with the in-floor heating that I installed at the beginning of year 2. Then near the end of year 2, I trenched the lines for the glycol to be able to run from the boiler to the house, got that installed, and then Craig brought the wood boiler for us to put into place, and then I wired the boiler and the breaker into the panel. This is where I was so overwhelmed and knew I was going to need to hire someone to be able to get our heat on in the house before winter. I wanted to be able to heat our slab for our home's first winter in order to help minimize heaving because this is a floating slab. SMHC finished up the job doing the beautiful wall of plumbing, the pumps, and the backup electric boiler. We needed a backup in order to be able to easily be insured and to get a mortgage. It's really hard to be completely off-grid with a heat system without having some sort of heating backup. And because we had the in-floor heating and we wanted to keep the slab warm, the thing that makes the most sense is just to have the electric boiler. It costs half the price of materials and to install than a propane boiler would, and we're really not planning on using it much, only if we go on a vacation or a really long weekend. The wood boiler does a fantastic job of heating this home. Like, seriously.
I actually had the wood boiler running last winter before I got the insulation in because I wasn't ready for insulation. All I had was the exterior foam board insulation that's R5 and nothing in the attic. In the summer of year 3 this past summer, I was finally approved to start insulating the interior walls.
All I had to do was cut lines for where wires were. I listened to podcasts, I listened to documentaries. It was a really relaxing time.
I took my time insulating all of the walls, getting all of the nooks and crannies, and then I moved on to insulating my cathedral ceiling. Made custom vents out of cardboard and strapping in order to vent our ceiling, and I installed those for a fraction of the price of using the pink styrofoam mortar vents that didn't fit into my rafter spaces in the first place.
And then I took a break and I finished off the insulation by finishing off the vapor barriers, strapping the ceiling, which took so long. And we needed the strapping because I wasn't ready for drywall. And so I put the strapping up in order to hold the 22 inches of blow-in insulation that's required to get R60 for the attic. And then I was finally able to get heat on in an insulated home, a new goal that I had set for myself after realizing we weren't going to be able to move into our home before Christmas 2024. As you can see, it's not ready for us to move in. But before this realization of we're not getting in the home for winter, I was like, okay, we got to get the siding done because siding is required for occupancy permit. So in September of year 3, this past year, I switched gears to the exterior work. And I mean, I had to get that soffit done in order to be able to have the blow-in insulation in the attic. A really cool guy named Danny reached out to me. His company is called Good Neighbors Exteriors. He did an incredible job with all of the soffit, fascia, seamless eavesdrop, and custom capping and bending to make all of those custom finishes come together. Before, between, and after their time coming to work, I was able to get the blocking up for the soffit and get some of the custom finishing work done, like getting this beautiful stained siding up in order for them to complete the fascia on the custom bump out, getting this feature wall done with custom finished plywood, all fitted together, stained and sealed, trimmed out. Oh my gosh, I absolutely loved that project. I realized during this time how tricky finishing work is and how time consuming it is. And I learned I need to be way more patient with myself in doing the finishing work, that I'm learning that is going to take a lot of time, and that's okay. I eventually got there and I eventually got it done, but there were definitely breakdowns along the way. And speaking of breakdowns, I had many trying to figure out how to do the vinyl trimming for my vinyl siding. I nearly gave up and called Danny to come and do the work for me. And I actually had a big mental breakdown where I took a long 4-day weekend off to regroup, recenter. And again, I'm learning over and over and over again, I need to be more patient with myself. I remember watching YouTube video on siding and listening to a guy say, if you think you're going to learn siding in one day, you do not have a high enough respect for the trades. And that hit me. It completely changed my perspective. It's not that I'm not learning fast enough. It's that this is an actual skill set that needs to be learned and is often taught with another person there with you. You're not typically starting a trade from the ground up and not having anyone there to step in and give you a hand and teach you how to do things more efficiently. So I stepped back, did more research, and I started fresh. Who knew vinyl trimming was going to be one of my biggest mental blocks to overcome in 2024? But oh my gosh, when it finally clicked. Oh, I was so proud of myself for pushing through and making it look like pretty good and clean, if I might say. I did some pretty good details. Putting up the vinyl siding after doing the trimming was so satisfying after overcoming the hurdles of learning the trimming and getting all of that foam board closed off, hopefully to never be seen again. So now I'm standing here ready for drywall to be delivered. And whoopsie, I already have my whole kitchen delivered. Speaking of timelines not working out, I haven't even picked out my flooring yet. This whole project has just been crazy to look back on. When you take a look at it as a whole, it gets so overwhelming. When I was back learning to use an excavator, it would be way too overwhelming to think about how I was going to learn how to frame the whole house. So I looked at it chunk by chunk, trade by trade, project by project. And that definitely screwed me up along the way because there were so many things that I was inexperienced on, like how to frame a wall more efficiently for the plumbing or more efficiently for the electrical to be run through from one end of the house to the other. I had to remove studs and reframe certain walls along the way because there was too much to learn all at once. But I think that's okay. I think it's okay to take each project chunk by chunk instead of having to learn the whole process at once. If you're wanting to do a journey like this, it is not worth knowing the whole thing right from the get-go. But if you know everything already, you are going to have a much easier time building your home. Year 2025 is going to be a year of transformation. For over a year and a half, the walls have been up in this home. You've seen the rough-ins go in. It's been a slow process. Everything that I've done in this home is going to be covered up. The drywall is going to be installed. Primer and paint will be put on the walls. Flooring will be installed. The kitchen will be installed. We'll have a bathroom and a shower and laundry here. We're gonna have laundry here. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna have a pantry and a full-size fridge. I'm gonna have a big couch that we can all sprawl out on. It's going to be all worth it. The last 3 years, I am not gonna lie, they were really overwhelming. All of those timelines, the deadlines that I had to meet, it was too much, especially with the YouTube edits on top of that, dealing with brands, responding to comments, because I want to keep that community alive. I absolutely love hearing from you all. This year, it is my goal to be less overwhelmed, to not live in a constant state of panic and when's this going to get done and when is that going to get done. Like, the heat is in, the home is heated. That was my biggest concern. Now I can work here in a cozy environment over the winter and I don't have to worry about rushing, because honestly, I really don't think I'm going to rush to get in for Christmas 2025. I think we're just going to be in, hopefully in the next 6 months. I'm hoping to work 1 day less a week on the house, to take that day for admin work, for editing, so that my weeks can be a little bit more relaxed and I have more time for my family and for myself, to be able to fill my bucket up and do the things that I love, like gardening, actually getting my homestead going, having water and the plumbing in and ready for me to be able to irrigate. I haven't been able to irrigate a garden in over 3 years. I don't think you realize how upsetting that is when you plant something and you're just hoping and praying that it rains, and if it doesn't, your crops are ruined. I want to get back to some of those passions. Maybe build the chicken coop this year, maybe build the deck this year. That's going to help create an amazing indoor and outdoor space. Creating magic in your life doesn't have to be perfect, but I can't create that magic in my life for myself or my lovely humans, my family, without taking care of myself. Thank you for being here. Thank you for an incredible 2024. Happy New Year. Let's get through January. It's gonna keep getting brighter. I'm so grateful to have a community to share this all with. And with that, I will see you next week. Time to start getting ready for drywall.